1 minute after. Good. I'm gonna go ahead and get us started, you guys. I love being able to do this. I love being able to connect to people, you know, all over the world and share some things that we're all equally passionate about. And we have the right experts on the call today to do this. Marcy and I go way back. We've been working together. She's going to come. She's going to bring some expertise. Aaron and I are new friends, and we've had some time together in New Jersey when I was spending some time with the Eduscape team at their home office. And here's what I've learned about STEM, and I'm sure they're going to share a lot of light on this, but STEM is not an event. It's not a day. It's not a thing that it's not a one day kind of plan it and do it kind of thing. If we want to be really effective at STEM, we need to think of it from a big picture perspective and understand, from end to end, how do we integrate these concepts into the regular school day for how our children are being exposed to learning. And so I can't think of a better team here today to talk about it. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Aaron and Marcy. You guys take it away. I will chime in because that's kind of what I do. And then I'll be here to button it up at the end whenever you guys are done.
Thanks, Josh. And hi, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to be here today. As shared, my name is Erin Saylor, and I'm the Director of Professional Development with Eduscape. And I'm joined by my colleague, Marcy Hebert, who's the Director of STEM here with Eduscape, and another colleague on the call, Jessica. And not only to highlight who we are, but really to call out as part of our theme here of rethinking learning with STEM, we all are former educators and those on our team as well. I taught many grades, but predominantly 11th and 12th grade in English and history. I was a special education teacher for many years in Harlem, New York. Marcy, did you want to share a little bit about your background as well?
Sure. I'm from right outside of New Orleans, Louisiana, and I spent almost 20 years in the classroom before coming to Eduscape. And I was the crazy one doing all those things that others thought were kind of crazy down the hall. I was doing STEM before we called it STEM.
Awesome. So as we get to share with you what we do and hear a little bit about what's motivated you to come to this webinar and what your experience and goals are with STEM, just sharing a bit of our backgrounds, because we are educators and are so passionate about education, and just grateful to be able to show you how we've put together a program and our approaches to be able to help everybody be able to do STEM. And like Josh said, it's not just an event, it's not just a letter, but how are we really providing the best opportunities and well-rounded experiences for our students to be able to pursue and define success as it looks like for them. And that includes being able to enter any field or address world problems that are known or unknown, or be able to pursue and just experience a life that's meaningful for them as well. So as we go through this presentation, you're going to see the hashtag rethink learning. This is Eduscape's mission and vision and motto and everything above. So if you're connecting with us on social media, feel free to use hashtag rethink learning. And essentially, as part of our mission, we're thinking about how do we take ideas, topics, strategies, approaches, and innovate them, be able to figure out where challenges are, what are the necessary or possible strategies, how do we rethink our approaches. So it's what drives us in education, and also to help pursue greater accessibility and equity in what we do as well. So for today's webinar, we're going to start off with an icebreaker. We're going to dive a little bit into 21st century skills, which you may or may not be familiar with, share with you our STEM Made Simple program, talk about some possible next steps for doing this work in your school or connecting with us, and open it up for plenty of time with Q&A as well. For our learner outcomes, we just really want to be able to share with you our STEM Made Simple program, and also connect with you. How are you doing STEM? What are your STEM challenges? What are your needs? Who are your students? What's the educational sphere that you serve? So we can always continue learning more about what need is out there as we connect with our fellow educators. So in that spirit, to kick it off, starting out with an icebreaker, which I just saw an article about how underestimated icebreakers are for building community, especially when you might be able to see my face, but I don't necessarily see all of you, but I can see your names and can chat with you here in the chat. So my question is, what motivated you to join this webinar today? You can put that in the chat. There's not that many of us. You're always welcome to come off mute as well. So take a moment and reflect whether you share it or not. What's motivating you to be here today? You're all taking time out of your busy lives and day. Is there something you're hoping to get out of it? Or yeah, Starbucks coffee. I have my coffee sitting next to me. Absolutely. Looking for more STEM ideas, curiosity, awesome. Just exploring professional development, passion for STEM, piquing your interest. And I had shared a little bit about my background too, that I was a special education teacher in English and history. So anybody who's not necessarily teaching STEM actively, or you may not think you are, you probably are, even though it's not called STEM in your school or by your course name. I taught English and history mostly in reading intervention. And I didn't realize I was doing STEM, but as I learned more about STEM and worked with Marcy and worked with other educators, realizing how I was embodying the STEM mindset in my classroom, and that's something we'll unpack as well. Awesome. Thank you for sharing this information in the chat, and keep sharing it as well if there's something you want to know more about or a question you have. So this is meaningful time for you. So as we're starting our conversation about STEM and why we're doing this work, one of the motivating questions that we always consider and always are looking into are, what are those skills that are necessary for students to thrive in the 21st century? And thrive is a great word here for me, at least, because when I think back to the students that I taught, not all of their paths look the same, but they have the capability, they have the potential. So how are they able to pursue that path? And I had mentioned this already, I'll probably say it over and over, but really define success as it feels and means to them. So how do they go out into the workforce, be able to find jobs, apply to jobs, be able to challenge these problems that are unknown in our society as well? So as we think through these questions, or this question rather, it leads us into being able to categorize and name and define what those skills are. And you've probably heard of or work with 21st century skills. So here, there's many 21st century skills that are needed, and we've seen them identified differently or changing, especially over the last 2 years with the pandemic. Flexibility, for example, was a trait that was most needed and valued in the workplace, that ability to adapt and change and kind of be resilient along the way as well. So as we're thinking through 21st century skills and how we're also going to support students in these skills, you might be familiar with the 4 C's. We've broken them down into 4 buckets: creativity, communication, critical thinking skills, and collaboration. So just pausing right here, if you reflect to yourself or if you'd like to share in the chat, these are probably skills that you're using every single day or many times throughout the day in your job, working with colleagues and being able to execute whatever role you're fulfilling. So quick reflection, which one of these is most used in your everyday role? Is it communication, creativity, collaboration, or critical thinking? For me, well, it's all of them. But I'm going to go with my theme for today. Today, it's communication. How can I clearly express my needs, my challenges, my wonderings with colleagues in order to then be able to lend itself to creativity, to critical thinking, or to collaboration? And as I continue to refine on my communication skills, definitely tripping and falling at times, but with reflection, being able to continue developing them. And I see in the chat, thanks for sharing, everyone, communication, critical thinking a couple times, creativity, communication as well. So right off the bat, we know, and it's probably pretty obvious, how relevant these skills are in our day-to-day. So as we're thinking about what we're doing in our classroom, how are we able to support our students in bolstering and developing these skills so they're also prepared to transition? Thinking about us as educators at the start of their path and being able to support them as they build towards their independent adult selves. There's many other identified skills that go into 21st century skills and what's needed for the workforce as well. So just calling out a few more here on the screen. Some that you may recognize immediately. Some you may not have considered, or some you may subconsciously realize how important they are. So for example, one that sticks out to me is media literacy. Being able to curate and understand and analyze different digital sources, or they don't necessarily have to be digital either. And also with that, understand the context they're presented, any bias that's there. So as I'm reading through headlines, I'm a serial headline reader, read way more headlines than I do actual articles, which probably is something I need to work on. But it goes into my ability to have media literacy as well. How do I find information and be able to make sense of it so I can be a critical thinker? Are there any of these additional skills that stand out to you as being most important for your students, or your the people that are students for you, whether you're teaching adults or if you're teaching students? Which ones resonate with you and your population? Teaching to incorporate technology, I see. Yeah, that difference between how do I make sense of all the information that's in front of me? I don't know about you all, but no matter how old you are, this is really important, and it's a new skill that can be learned. I've had that conversation with my grandmother before about what she reposts, and is it relevant, is it not? How do you know it's a spam or a phone call that she receives that's, you know, related to something that's just a spam, and helping her navigate that world as well. Social skills, leadership training, absolutely. And these are things that you are, as you reflect, you're probably already doing them. And with the STEM Made Simple program, what this is helping me do in my practice and others as well, it's bringing that reminder, that intentionality of what these named skills are. So as we're planning lessons, we're not only just referring back to our Common Core standards or to our learning outcomes, but also thinking about how these 21st century skills are woven into the theme or explicitly taught within a lesson as well. And there's a ton of skills. So this leads me to ask, how do we help students acquire and practice all of these skills? There's a lot of things that can be done, that need to be done rather. And at least on the onset for me, it's a little bit overwhelming. It's that kind of feeling and that sense of how much students really do rely on their teachers, or how vulnerable teaching can be, because you've got their futures in your hands, so to say. So wanting to be able to serve our students as best as we can, but how do we do this in a way that's sustainable and it's meaningful and intentional? So with the STEM Made Simple program, we're working to take our mission, our vision, and be able to rethink that approach to teaching, always considering students at the heart of it. What do they need to be successful now and in their adult lives as well? And also with that, how do we support the people who teach students to also develop their practices and have that support? Combine that with good pedagogy, or rather kind of best practices with pedagogy, keeping it evidence-based. And within the theme of STEM, how do we support the mindsets and the habits and the skills that are needed to tackle problems or challenges in the world related to STEM? And ultimately being able to yield a program that is always focused on skill and mindset driven. So how are we developing those skills, adapting those mindsets? Making sure that the practice and the content is relatable and authentic to students as well. How can we take something they're learning and put it in context, their context, whether it's their own persons, their family, their community, the country, or the global world as well. I had mentioned evidence-based strategies. So what are those best practices that help students acquire their reading, writing, social skills, leadership skills, whatever the skills are that we're working towards? And ultimately, a program that is promoting equity and accessibility. We might be doing all this great work to teach our students, but how can we up how students access the lesson? We want to make sure that they are able to be there learning at their access point. So all the work we're doing is landing on for the students to actually experience and have them get the most out of that experience. So with our STEM Made Simple program, our approach includes different ways that we could reach professional development, and really professional development is at the heart of it, because we might not be able to influence or control what's happening at home for students, but as teachers and educators and anybody working in the education field, what is within our realm of influence is how we develop our knowledge, our skills, our resiliency, our flexibility to be able to plan and execute these practices in the classroom. So part of the program includes workshops around the topics. These could be on-site or virtual as well. Our team of former educators become quite skilled over the last 2 years and more delivering these virtual sessions, but also really aiming to add flexibility. So whether your school prefers in-person or on-site or virtual rather, being able to gain access to professional development that's designed the way that you would like to learn. Also incorporates e-learning that can be done asynchronously or synchronously, guided by a coach. Coaching that's on-site or virtual as well, being able to establish a long-term relationship and develop that relationship with a teacher as we go through observations, and being a thought partner in how we strategize to implement STEM in the classroom. We also are very data-driven. So we have a series of STEM self-assessments that are used to help teachers kind of self-identify their areas of strength and their areas of growth. Also helps inform how we recommend crafting the STEM Made Simple program and consult for the program in a school. If there's teachers that are already doing STEM and more advanced, we want to be able to meet them in their practice and accommodate those that maybe are joining the school newly or new to STEM or just beginning their careers as well. So with our data-driven assessments and our approach with the self-assessments, being able to use that to consult school leaders and design a really systematic and data-driven approach to the program, one that's customized for the school as well. And lastly, incorporating really intentional educational technology tools, depending on the school's goal. It might be coding or designing or wanting to work on a specific skill set within students. So what is the right ed tech tool to support that or to promote? So we'll talk a little bit more about some of the ed tech tools that are supported within the program as well. So these are our components to the STEM Made Simple program. Now, this could look very different based on the school, but let's take a look at a sample of what this could actually look like in practice. How do these components make up a systematic approach to a STEM program and professional development? So when we're working with a school, going through that process of the self-assessments, really understanding what is the goal, what's the mission, what is the culture around STEM implementation as it exists now. It's not to go and kind of apply something that doesn't fit, but rather really intentionally infuse STEM in part of the culture. So it's more likely to be authentic to the teachers and students that are experiencing it, and also more sustainable because it's going to be done because it's actually a realistic approach to how the school functions and already and their practices. So that includes meeting with leadership to kick off the program and align those goals. We have a STEM Foundations workshop that's 2 days, hands-on lab, experiencing STEM lessons from a student perspective, and then analyzing and unpacking how they would be adapted for each person's classroom. Being able to engage in workshops and e-learning based on the specific topics, whether it's, and we're going to unpack these topics a little bit more, but whether it's a focus on adapting STEM for the arts, or if it's about accessibility or intentional planning or project-based learning. And then also being able to monitor the program along the way. It's really important that we just don't, apply one approach and then live out that approach, whether it works or not. With the data we collect, with the conversations and the intentional consultation, being able to have those check-ins and, what's working, what's not working, how do we adapt, what are the right topics that we want to cover. So it's really growing and living with a school environment as we form a partnership. And ultimately along the way, having experiences with coaches as well. In my practice, the most impactful, hands down impactful changes to my practice and my career were the experiences I had with coaches. Whether it was as intensive of having a coach have a headset on my ear, kind of helping me my first few years, you know, how I might manage my classroom, to lesson planning, to leading a grade team, whatever it might be that's related, you know, working with those coaches so that way somebody has a person to speak to, ideas to bounce off, and continues to grow and adapt as they implement. So, you know, it's not just I'm going to only get coached my first year because I'm a first year teacher, but as people grow, how do they get refreshed with the learning, or how do they deepen their practice even further? And I don't know about you all, but even in the last year that I was teaching, there was always new challenges. So it was never done learning. And that's where I really relied on the support of my coaches through that process. So going through some of the components of the program as a whole and how this might look kind of sequenced out or as implemented throughout the year, let's talk about some of the key concepts that are covered in the program. And as we go through these key concepts, if you all can reflect on how do these resonate with the work that you're doing or the goals that you have for supporting STEM in your educational sphere? Are these topics that are meaningful or relevant to you? Are these topics or key concepts that your teachers are super skilled in already and could teach others? Or are there areas for growth or deepening practice, especially as you have new teachers that enter the field? So within the Approach the STEM Made Simple program, one of the topics or key concepts that we focused on is the idea of problem-based learning. As we are designing STEM experiences and thinking about how we're assessing learning, being able to leverage problem-based learning to support students in going through that process of solving those real-world problems, asking and answering questions, or following that line of inquiry. So there'll always probably be a place in your classroom where students are doing more traditional assessments, but how can they also then prepare and practice and get feedback on those skills that they may be assessed on, but also those, not just what's for the assessment, but those skills that they're going to need in their life. Providing experiences where students have the opportunity to, in a low risk way, practice and collaborate and take some risks and get the feedback to be able to develop their skills even further. So problem-based learning is one of the concepts that we cover, and this is something that could be a focus of coaching or within a workshop as a whole as well. Building off of problem-based learning is inquiry-based learning. With inquiry-based learning, we help take these pedagogical practices and lay out what the strategy could look like and how it could also be adapted in the classroom. So for example, if I was working with a teacher to create inquiry-based learning experience or activities or assessments in the classroom, we might unpack the strategy of the 5 E's, which includes having students go through this 5-step iterative process where they're engaged in a topic, exploring that topic on their own in kind of a risk-free way, low-risk way, some direct instruction of the topic, and then having them apply what they've learned. And ultimately, we always put evaluate in the center because assessment is happening along the way from the teacher perspective, but also student self-assessment or peer assessment. So with very concrete strategies that can be used at any time. So these are definitely high leverage because it can go in any grade level, any subject, by any teacher at any time of the unit. They can be done over and over. And with the strategy being able to be broken down, practiced, and given feedback, teachers can really start to master what STEM could look like with these approaches. And I had mentioned I was a special education teacher. I love something like the inquiry-based learning approach, especially with the 5 E's as a strategy, because I could make this as independent or as guided as I needed to, depending on where my students were. At the start of a unit, I might be the one who's posing the inquiry question for students and having them follow. As they practice and start to master those skills, they may be coming up with their own inquiry questions and have a lot more autonomy through the process because they're ready to have those scaffolds removed. So just some examples of how we're using these concepts that you may be familiar with or may not, but really building capacity of each educator to plan and implement. And I think that's super important at the heart of our STEM Made Simple program, is just as much as we're supporting students in developing and becoming independent adults, we are building the capacity among staff. As we work with a school, we want to be able to have teachers teach other teachers and have that work continue to live on year to year, so it becomes embedded in the culture of the school, rather than, you know, an initiative, which is something I would hear in my school all the time. It's not something that's just done once because it's a trendy topic, but really it's something that we believe helps students pursue their paths, and it's something that we want to commit to on a long-term basis. Another topic we explore is the design process, which you might use in your adult life as well, but an iterative and creative process for students to be able to brainstorm, plan, provide feedback and prototype, and actually test what they're working on. So whether this actually, as an former English teacher, kind of mimics the writing process for me, but whether I'm doing the design process, writing an essay where I need to outline and draft my essay and eventually publish it, or whether I'm in art class creating a piece of work that's going through various stages of design to creating a science lab or experimenting in a science lab. Being able to take these strategies that can be named, that can be practiced, and help infuse them within any content area as well. So as students are going throughout their day, they're moving from English to social studies to history, or within the different topics of an elementary classroom, they're having multiple exposures to these strategies and ultimately giving them more practice time as well. We also focus a lot on backward design and other instructional design models to support planning. Again, when it goes back to capacity building, we would like to be able to have teachers be build their confidence and be creative and exploratory, but ultimately sustainable in designing those lessons as well. So how do we kind of adapt that STEM mindset? So every time I'm approaching a lesson, I'm thinking about that 21st century skill that I want to focus on, and being able to think about all the different strategies I have in my toolbox to help support students in developing that skill, and just kind of become more automatic in my STEM planning as well. And as we're getting to the close of our key concepts and moving into the next part of the program, which is the EdTech tools, it's incredibly relevant to think about the concept of TPACK, which is something we unpack during the program. TPACK is the idea of how we are approaching planning with the pedagogy and content in mind, and using a technology to support the outcomes of that experience. So it's not necessarily picking the latest and greatest EdTech tool and trying it out in the classroom, but rather I want my students to build their media fluency or literacy. So what is a tool that would be able to help them experience that in a deeper way? It's really taking, and this is where we're going to talk about in a second, but educational technology can really break open the 4 traditional walls of the classroom. When I was teaching, I may not always be able to bring my students on a field trip. And at times it could feel limiting, whatever resources I had in my classroom. But as I became more comfortable integrating digital tools, being able to connect students with students across the world, or even in another classroom in my school, if they may not be able to, work cross-curricularly all the time. So TPACK is another concept that we unpack in the program. And in the beginning, I had talked about how we are working to support equity and accessibility to these educational experiences, to the STEM fields, to the skills that are needed for students to define and pursue success for them and be successful as adults in our 21st century world. So incorporating frameworks like the Universal Design for Learning. Shout out in the chat if you have already worked with Universal Design for Learning, or if your teachers are working with it to create access in their lessons. Let me know in the chat. but being able to incorporate how can we provide multiple means of engagement, representation, or action and expression for students to be able to demonstrate that they will learn and demonstrate that they've mastered a concept or be able to give insight to where support might be needed. With the different concepts that we've talked about, especially like inquiry, problem-based learning, UDL, being able to help leverage the use of assessment, intentional assessment, and data as well to help make decisions on what we might do next. I might have just gone through, I did all this work to plan an amazing problem-based learning activity, and I saw that only 30% of students really grasped the main outcomes for the lesson. So how does that inform my practice? What might I do next? How can I dive into my STEM toolbox and think about what I might need to adapt or do differently in order to support? So being able to take all of these components, name them, practice them, and give feedback along the way. So as teachers supporting students in STEM, there's that capacity to be able to adapt to problems, identify what the challenge might be, and determine solutions ultimately. And we're getting to the end here, but I want to talk a little bit about STEM habits of mind. This is something that is infused in every aspect of our program as well. When we're thinking about STEM, and Marcy's the best advocate for this, we're not just thinking about, okay, how are we supporting students' science skills and their technology and their engineering and their math? We're thinking about what are the processes that students' minds are going through? What are their attitudes? What are their executive functioning skills? How is their social emotional well-being? How are they able to take a challenge, wrestle with it, overcome it, or strategize to overcome it? So as we're thinking about STEM, and this is why we say it can be done in any single subject, because we're really thinking about whether, let's take physical education, for example. It may not explicitly seem like a STEM topic, but as students are, prototyping a accessible entrance into the gym, or they are breaking down the steps of a layup, or calculating other definitely exposing my lack of physical education knowledge, but thinking back to my experience, calculating BMI or something like that, body mass index, being able to think about, okay, even though it may not seem like a STEM topic, what are the skills that students need that adapt and transfer to their adult lives, but also what are the mindsets and the processes that they're going through to be able to work through that challenge. And I'm just reading in the chat and catching up as well. Yeah, shouting out UDL and how you've used it before. Thank you for sharing. And related to backward design, in the model or design of our program, being able to model quality STEM experiences that teachers can actually take and adapt in their classroom. And that's something when I check in with educators all the time, that is a greatest request. How are other people doing it? How are they adapting it? What are points of inspiration? So creating and cultivating a community, I talked about, really infusing STEM into the culture of a school. How can we build capacity by giving resources that are useful to teachers, like sample lessons or activities that they can actually use and model and practice in their classrooms. And lastly, I just want to touch upon tool integration, or those educational technology tools that are used to then deepen students' practice, deepen engagement, and really create that authentic learning experience, as well as they are able to wrestle with problems that are relevant in the world or are relevant to them. So some examples of tools that we support integrating into the classroom, and this isn't just necessarily the STEM classroom or the science classroom or the math classroom, but working with art, physical education, music, English teachers as well, and many more. The tools like the Photon robot, which is a coding robot that it can really grow with students from kindergarten to 12th grade, as they start by using block code or driving even Photon like a remote control unit, to coding with Python, all within the same tool. Being able to use Photon to engage in physics activities or sustainable energy activities. Using something like the Robo 3D printer to be able to then prototype and design creation, whether I had mentioned, something that would create more accessibility for students in physical education class, to attachments that could attach to the Photon robot, and many more. Photon's amazing. And lastly, calling out PyTop and Hummingbird, which are great to support coding, can be used in any subject as well. PyTop having a computer that students can actually build and use to create programs, and Hummingbird, which you can use with like a microbit and be able to see how hardware is used and interacts with software as well. So they're building that correlation between computational thinking and algorithmic thinking as well. And this is really important because we want to work with tools you're already using, or highlighting features of these tools, ultimately just to deepen engagement, deepen those skill development, and support those students. So let's check back in on these 21st century skills before we get to our next steps in Q&A. With these 21st century skills, looking back at them, how would the STEM Made Simple program support communication, creativity, collaboration, or critical thinking? You can share in the chat if anything stood out to you from the presentation. And I'll call out a few as well. So with the design, engineering design process supporting creativity. So we'll walk through students through a process in which they can actually, think of something, a solution, a strategy, a design that they are thinking of and that makes sense to them, being able to test it, iterate it through collaboration, being able to go through that inquiry-based process, ask questions of each other, follow that line of inquiry, whether you're doing a Socratic seminar in English class or you're doing a lab in science, being able to take collaboration and asking questions and following that line of inquiry, no matter which subject you're in. Yeah, and if you're using any of these processes already, like you had shared with UDL, please share if you're using engineering design process or if you've done problem-based learning or tried it as well. And with the strategies within the program that we build capacity with, they are really high leverage strategies because, again, kind of when I look at, all these different skills and more that need to be taught and developed throughout the year while students are in my classroom, it definitely is a lot of weight on my shoulder and feels like a lot of pressure, or makes me think, how am I going to get through all of this content in the time that I have? So with really intentional strategies that are high leverage because they hit at multiple skills, I can be confident and see direct impact with my students that they're able to practice multiple of these multiple skills at a time, instead of having to find a strategy that's related to just each individual skill. So you've heard a lot from me. I'd love to hear your questions. So as I close out with our call to action, if you have any questions, you can start putting those in the chat as well. But as you are thinking about your current STEM practices and your goals and where you want STEM to be for your students, some things that you could do are reflect on your current STEM practices. That's really important. Just what are they? What do you want? So as you're thinking about what STEM could look like in your educational sphere, you have some clarity on your goals and what's working, what's not working, where do you want to be? We have a wonderful and active Facebook group to continue the conversation with a professional learning community, connect with other educators who are doing this work and see how they're doing it or share resources. You can learn more about our STEM Made Simple program at the URL on the screen, and we can put that into the chat as well. And engage in continued professional learning on the topic, just like you took time to show up and be here today and learn more or follow that curiosity. Through Traffair and Eduscape, being able to engage in that STEM professional development to keep developing your understanding, whether it's because you're teaching directly in the classroom or you're building the capacity of your staff. So with that being said, opening up to Q&A and happy to answer any of your questions. So some questions that I see coming through are, do you recommend different ed tech technologies or do you package them in programs? That's a wonderful question. So the answer is yes to both. And that is really kind of at the nature of our consultative approach. As we're going through intake with a potential partner or a partner, what we're thinking about are what are you already using? And what are your goals? And how do those ed tech tools align to those goals? So at times it may be a particular tool like the Photon robot that grows with you. It's a great coding tool to take from K through 12. At other times, there's really wonderful bundles that can be used to deepen teacher and student practices. So taking the Photon robot with the 3D printer tool, so students can prototype designs, print them on the 3D printer. And Photon actually has magnetic ports that you could print magnetic prototype and attach it to Photon, or you could just use construction paper, for example, and tape it on, whatever it might be, or glue. So answer is yes and yes. Recommend ed tech tool and package them. Yep, absolutely. We'll send the slide deck. We can follow up with an email with the slide deck. And I'll put that in the chat at the end of the presentation too. And another question that came through is, does your program work for small schools or is it only meant for larger schools? Another wonderful question, and thank you for asking it because other people might be wondering it as well. Our program works for all schools. So we have partners that are, there's only 20 teachers in the school and only a couple hundred students or less, and other whole districts that are much larger. So with the program, we've intentionally worked to scale it with our team of experienced teachers as well, being able to ensure that there's enough coaches per site, being able to deliver workshops in person or virtually to accommodate your schedule, depending on the number of teachers you have. So absolutely can support small and large schools or whole districts. Absolutely.
Erin, I wondered if I could jump in with a question here too.
Of course.
There was something that you touched on that I think we could maybe zoom into a little bit. About midway through your presentation, you were talking about developing local expertise and building kind of a community within to do support. And I know teaching is, for me, one of the most community building professions that I've ever been around. I mean, I can remember so many times just stepping outside of my classroom and just looking around at each other, and all the teachers are looking at each other like, are your kids acting crazy today? Because my kids are acting crazy. And there's just something really beautiful about having that kind of connection, and it's so organic. And the more I work in professional development, the more I'm starting to realize that teachers are very likely to lean on each other for support, maybe more so than what they are looking for some trainer to come in and just fix everything. And I just wondered if I could just maybe have you kind of reflect on that, or maybe Marcy would come in and chime in on this too, because every time I've been around you all and you're talking about STEM Made Simple, it does not seem like a rescue plan. It seems like a plan to build capacity at the local level and build a structure by which teachers can lean on each other. And I wondered if you could maybe punch into that a little bit and kind of maybe expand on that a little bit from your experience, either one of you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Josh, I have been hiding in the background here listening. One of the things I want to say to that is, I get frustrated as a teacher when we don't respect, or when others don't come into my school and respect the expertise of what teachers already are doing. There's sometimes a bad habit with professional development to come in and just kind of ignore what people know, and this is what I'm going to do today, and that's it. And so I think one of the things we've tried to be very respectful of as we design is that everybody's in different places. Talk to 10 people about STEM, you're probably going to get 10 different definitions. And so we try to really use that time to learn about our clients and see what is it they need. Where are the teachers already at? Because for some of the teachers here, I saw comments like, I love the engineering design process. If that's a strength, we don't want to go through that again and again. Every one of us as a teacher has sat through where they drill the same thing over and over and they never get to what we need. And so that's what's really important to us, is what do people need? And it's all about good teaching. That's what STEM boils down to. It's not an acronym, it's about good teaching. And that goes across the board.
Absolutely. And I know a particular passion of mine, and that resonates across the passions of my colleagues as well, is I've seen so many really strong teachers leave the profession because of that sustainability or that feeling of being valued, and being able to have access to quality professional learning so they can continue deepening and developing their skills, especially when new challenges arise. So with our program as well, like Marcy said, being able to build capacity for teachers to do this work long term. It is absolutely an understatement to say this work is hard. And I just didn't even need to say it because we all know it. So how are we being able to meet teachers where they're at, where their kids are at, what they need, what their goals are, and make this work intentional, but completely accessible? And that's where STEM Made Simple comes from. And it's not, oversimplifying or dumbing it down, so to say. That is not the intention. It's definitely rigorous and it's challenging, but being able to build confidence among staff that no matter who you are, how far into your practice are, how many stumbles you've had along the way, or what subjects you teach, these are things that you are probably already doing, but now let's identify why they're super important to do and how you can take it a step further as well.
So good, Erin. I'm so grateful that you guys could join us and participate in this. I always have great takeaways from every time that we can get together, and this one has been no exception for me. And so, for those of you who are on the call, maybe you're in a leadership position, maybe you're a teacher or tech director or whatever, regardless of where you sit in your school's organizational chart, I would encourage you guys to reflect a little bit on what we've discussed today, and take a few minutes, complete this exercise here that's on the screen. If you want to know more about STEM Made Simple, one thing that I can absolutely promise you is that we don't do high pressure, sales. We're not gonna call you and show up at your front door and try to sell you a product. That's not how we work. You heard from Erin, you heard from Marcy. Our number one thing is about building educator capacity so that these student achievement gaps that we're all seeing in all of our schools will reduce to the point that they're microscopically small. And at the end of the day, student achievement will increase, and we'll be better off for it. And that is our goal. It is not to sell you a bill of goods. So if this is something that you're interested in and you want to learn more about it, and you're maybe thinking, how does this size to my district or to my school, or what's the investment going to look like? Fill out the survey. We'll send you some information. We can schedule a quick meeting between myself, Erin, Marcy, maybe a salesperson from Trafera if we need that. But anyway, whatever it takes, we'll be here to answer questions for you. Yeah, so there's the poll. I'm going to read through Jenny's comment here just to make sure I'm not missing anything. Anything else? Final thoughts from you, Erin or Marcy?
Just want to share again, thank you for taking time out of your day to be here and sharing a little bit about where you're at with STEM and what your goals are as well. And happy to continue a discussion and connect with you through our communities of practice on STEM as well. So thanks, everyone.
Yeah, awesome. All right. Bye, everyone. Everyone, do an awkward Zoom wave.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.